Thursday nights. Thursday nights were the worst nights growing up for me in elementary school. I would come home from school and my mother would ask for my spelling list for that week. I would hand her my spelling list and a pretest would ensue. From there, feeling pretty confident about the words that I'd been studying all week, I handed my pretest back to my mother, and with a red pen, one by one, she would mark my list wrong. Then, being the good, dedicated mother that she was, I would write all of my words 10 times each, all the ones that I missed. And the cycle would continue with yet another pretest. This happened until I passed the test, which was rare, or it was just strictly time for bed. My name is Meghan Nguyen, and I have dyslexia. Now, dyslexia wasn't something that was talked about, diagnosed, or even really known in rural Kentucky where I grew up. But in the 3rd grade, my teacher noticed that I wasn't actually reading. She could tell that what I was doing was memorizing stories that she had read to the class, or using pictures or context clues to fill in the details of the stories myself. But I wasn't really reading. As my friends would go off to the cafeteria for gifted and talented hour, I, by myself, would go to our school basement to the reading resource room. And there, one-on-one with a special education teacher, she taught me to read. Through that year, they said I was cured. I could read. Whatever the developmental delay that I had was gone. But that was far from the truth. Now, I was super excited when I hit middle school because no more spelling tests, right? High school was a little bit challenging. I was never wanting to be called along to read out loud. If I was, there I was sitting in an AP English class, tracking the words with my finger. It was embarrassing. Not only that, but group projects, I never volunteered to be the scribe. I knew that if I wrote anything on a poster, that poster would obviously be destroyed because something would be spelled wrong on it. I felt dumb, or even worse, lazy, but I couldn't help it. I never understood how to spell. I moved beyond and finally graduated high school with over a 4.0, I may add. And I was excited to embark into my college journey. I was so excited until the dreaded blue book. No one warned me about these blue books. For you young people in the audience who might not have turned in a blue book, right? Because now we use online. These blue books are where we do our exams the entire semester. Being a geography major, most of my classes were blue book classes, which meant my grade, 100%, came from these essays that I would write in class. But I had a problem. Even though I knew the material, I had studied it, I had read it, I had been to every class, I couldn't spell those words on demand. Normal words that college students should know, I had to dumb down and use different words that I could spell. I was literally dumbing down my writing to sound smarter. An oxymoron, I know, right? But even simple words like there, it still gets me today. My spell check's really tired of me spelling that word incorrectly. Still happens. But again, my professors, they came to me and they said, "We don't understand. Why are you here? How did you get this far if you don't know how to spell?" I didn't have an answer for them. I didn't know what was wrong with me. But I graduated because C's make degrees, right? And I graduated and I moved beyond my college experience. Now, I'm super happy to report today I am a special education teacher, and I specifically teach 3rd through 5th grade reading intervention and English language arts. Shout out to my students. I am so lucky that when I get to meet a new student, I get to share my story with them. I struggled with reading. I still struggle with spelling, but yet I'm a productive adult who can give back to society with the gifts that I have besides spelling. I love sharing that no matter what your disability is or your difference, you too can go beyond and reach your fullest potential. One of my favorite quotes is by Frederick Douglass. "Once you learn to read, you will forever be free." Frederick Douglass learned to read and write illegally as an enslaved person. And when I started my journey through graduate school and had to pick a topic for my thesis, I knew I wanted it to be on education policy and reform. What are we doing today to help our minority students have an equitable educational opportunity? What are we doing today for our special education students to make sure that they're learning on par with all the other students? A few facts that I want you guys to know about dyslexia. First of all, it's an old term. It means word blindness, and it was in 1877 that that term was coined. Obviously, it didn't reach Kentucky in the 1980s. Whoops, right? Also, 1 in 5 people, so about 15 to 20% of our population, shows signs of dyslexia. That's going to come in handy here in just a minute. I want you to remember that number. Next, it is a spectrum, which means while my dyslexia presents in switching numbers around or bad spelling, it will present in others differently. It's really hard to diagnose because of that spectrum. Also, we rely on the right sides of our brains. So while we have some dysfunctions and other things, I'm really good at spatial awareness and creativity and other gifts that I've been given. And last, you cannot cure dyslexia. Even though my teachers felt that I was cured of my reading ailment in 3rd grade, I continue to struggle with reading aloud and switching things and spelling. I will never be cured, although I can always get better. Why is this important? So our statistics right now of students in pre-K through 12 that have been assigned with a specific learning disorder is 4.5% of students today. 4.5. Specific learning disabilities is an umbrella term, so it doesn't necessarily mean dyslexic. It houses other disabilities as well, so dyslexia, dysgraphia, traumatic brain injury, executive function disorder. There's a whole wide variety of things that go into this umbrella term, which means it's actually less than 4.5% of students that are identified as having dyslexia. As we saw before, 15 to 20% of our population shows signs of dyslexia. This means we are critically under-identifying students that have dyslexia in our pre-K to 12 system. Another point that I want to bring up is my intervention happened in 3rd grade. That is considered a delayed intervention. About 75% of students that have delayed intervention in 3rd grade or after will continue to struggle with reading, spelling, or other symptoms of dyslexia. Delayed intervention. So why does this all matter? I'm not going to pretend like I am a brain scientist. I am not a brain scientist, but I wanted to introduce to you the complexities of what happens within our brains whenever we read fluently with comprehension. This is Scarborough's rope. The bottom blue strands are phonics, decoding, taking those lines, dots, and squiggles and making sounds with them. How do those sounds react to each other? The top strands, the red ropes, are those that have comprehension behind it, vocabulary, background knowledge. How do we, after identifying those lines and squigglies and dots, put meaning to them? All of these things work together in your brain every millisecond that you read and you comprehend something. It's a lot for our brain to do. During my research into policy and reform and education, I was astonished to find the reading wars of the 1990s. And I want to make this clear that curriculum is policy. Teachers do not get to pick the curriculum that they choose. Schools do not get to pick curriculum. It is up to the district, the state, and sometimes even our nation to pick how teachers teach students to read. Okay. With this, I would like to introduce whole language. In the 1970s, this was a new idea, a holistic way of teaching students how to read. With this idea, they pushed aside phonics, and they said, I think students will enjoy reading more if they can learn to read faster and not have to be worried about the details of phonics, phonic education. With this became memorization, lots of repetition, context clues, pictures, and easily predictable texts. So just like in 3rd grade when my teacher noticed I was looking at pictures and making up the story, that's what it taught me to do. I am a product of whole language curriculum. In the 1980s and 90s during the reading wars, whole language won out. It sounded good. Holistic always sounds good, right? Buzzword. It sounded good to our politicians, and it was implemented in our schools across the nation, including Kentucky and our state of Oklahoma. Now, on the flip side of that, and just as old as whole language, we have the science of reading. The science of reading is systematic, leveled, explicit teaching of phonics. How words, letters, sounds work together. With that, we have spelling rules, word origins, where the words come from. We have decodable texts that might not be predictable, but a student who knows phonics can read, and they're actually reading. With this science of reading, we also have thematic readings, not just nonfiction texts or fiction text, but a mix of everything that gives us better background knowledge. Natalie Wexler literally wrote the book on background knowledge and the knowledge gap and how that affects our students today. I would like to share with you one of the studies that she presents out of Wisconsin in 1988. This is known as the baseball study. This took a group of 7th and 8th grade students from all reading levels and gave them a passage about baseball. Afterwards, they were given an assessment and asked a few comprehension questions. And with that, we have the graph that we see here. Turns out, even the poor readers, if they understood baseball and they had background knowledge of baseball, scored higher than the students who could technically read better but had no knowledge of the sport of baseball. This blew science minds. How did this happen? And it's with background knowledge. So how are we doing in Oklahoma today? I'm so glad you asked. Right now, as of 2022, our latest state test exams, we have 66% of our students that are scoring under proficient on their 4th grade reading test. 66%. The statistics get even worse when we talk about students of color. These students of color, 4 out of 5 of these students are not scoring proficient. I want to say that statistic again and let that number sink in. 4 out of every 5 of our students of color are not reading proficiently. So what can we do? So glad you asked. I would like for us to move beyond. We need to move beyond the political agendas of left and right and understand that the science of reading and instilling phonetic curriculum into our schools is the only way to reach equitable education for all students, including those with dyslexia, other delays or disabilities, and for our ELL students. One of my favorite Facebook groups is the Science of Reading, What I Should Have Learned in College. That includes teaching our teachers how to teach. As of right now, a lot of reading interventionalists have to get their master's in reading, not necessarily learning this kind of information in their bachelor's degree programs. I would argue that all teachers need to be able to facilitate reading, no matter if you're in elementary school or in high school or in middle school, all teachers. I would also say we need to move beyond labels. As we heard earlier, only 4.5% of students are actually diagnosed under specific learning disability category, but yet 15 to 20% of the human population show signs of dyslexia. If we're only giving aid to those students who have been labeled, we're missing a ginormous population of students with this condition. If we get rid of the labels and we teach science of reading to all students benefit. What's good for the dyslexic students and the ELL students is great for the reg ed students as well. And last, we need to look beyond our current practices of our intervention starting in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and maybe do some intervention starting in 1st and 2nd, really sitting with kids one-on-one, making sure that they are reading so we can intervene earlier rather than later. Me, for myself, I'm going to keep moving beyond every day. I'm going to keep working with my students every day and keep encouraging them to move beyond whatever difference they have and to show them that they too can be amazing human beings. Thank you.